but there's this huge untapped potential in unstructured data. And so at Box, with all of these new models that coming out from all these great providers, is kind of a gift to companies and to people who think like the way that we do, which is like sort of how can you get more out of your unstructured data? And now AI can basically understand unstructured data. So for the first time, you've had this automated ability to sort of have computers be able to understand, watch, read, look at these things, and then be able to not only generate for you new content, but also to understand and help you with the content that you already have, which in many companies is just, that's massive, petabytes, hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions of these kind of pieces of content. And in some cases, it's some of their most critical stuff they have in these organizations. I think there's a couple flavors that I think what you said is true, is that you kind of, when you add a junior developer in any company, like oftentimes you expect like a certain relatively small level of output compared to maybe some more senior people. But now, like a person who's really good at using the latest tools is actually quite productive, and that is a big value. And so you expect to get more out of it. So like a Box, like we are approaching, like I think we are right now, the most developers we've ever had, and I think that's projecting to continue.
Hello, everyone. My guest today is Ben. Ben is the Chief Technology Officer at Box. He was previously VP of Product at Box and also co-founder of Subspace. In this conversation, we'll talk about the role of unstructured data in AI. What are the cost structures of adopting AI and building with AI, and how AI is impacting enterprise business. If this is first time listening to Startup Project, don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening to us. You can also follow us on Substack at startupproject.substack.com. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
So I was really excited because I work in unstructured data as well, and I realize how important unstructured data is. But I think let's set a little bit of context for the audience. I think in the storage industry, it's a common phrase to use unstructured data. But I think it would be good to set the context of, okay, what is unstructured data, and why Box is in the center of all things AI.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Oftentimes, if you just said the word data to anyone, especially computer scientists or people who are sort of come from program backgrounds, you naturally think of data, structured data, right? And like we're going to become more data oriented. We're going to become, we need to use data, and it's partially because like there's been, I think, for those of us who experienced it, this like massive data revolution over the last like 10 or 20 years. It used to be, like, oh, I got my data in a MySQL database somewhere, and then it became like more and more tools available for you that you would use these terms like data lake and data warehouse, more advanced analytics tools. You see companies like Databricks, and you see companies like Snowflake that just become like these very powerful platforms of structured data. And that's just naturally what you think of. Now, the world of unstructured data, interestingly, and I would define unstructured data as almost as data that's not in a database, that doesn't have a schema to it, which is like things like emails and messages and like web pages. And then in our world at Box is the world of what we call content or files, or the stuff that goes into documents or PowerPoints or markdown files or videos or images. Like all of this is like unstructured data. And interestingly, almost every company that you talk to, in most of everything I'll talk about today is a very business to business, is a very enterprise oriented sort of thought process. Is they 90% or more of their data is actually unstructured. And so, and at Box, we have 120,000 enterprise customers. We have over an exabyte of data, and so this is what we've always kind of lived by. And so when you had data, some people would call it storage, some people would call it you need to collaborate on it, you need to sync it so that you can get the different places. But then with generative AI comes around, generative AI is kind of born on unstructured data. And so it naturally, immediately, like every company I've ever talked to, if you say, why are you interested in generative AI, one of their top three things they'll say will be, well, I've got all this internal stuff in my company that is unstructured data, and I don't think I'm taking advantage of it enough. And it takes a million different forms, and it's partly why it's been hard to kind of really automate or sort of like make these specialized applications to deal with these certain types of data. But there's this huge untapped potential in unstructured data. And so at Box, with all of these new models that coming out from all these great providers, is kind of a gift to companies and to people who think like the way that we do, which is like sort of how can you get more out of your unstructured data? And now AI can basically understand unstructured data. So for the first time, you've had this automated ability to sort of have computers be able to understand, watch, read, look at these things, and then be able to not only generate for you new content, but also to understand and help you with the content that you already have, which in many companies is just that's massive petabytes, hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions of these kind of pieces of content that in some cases is some of their most critical stuff they have in these organizations.
Unstructured data includes, Box, Amazon S3, Files has, Azure has Blob,
Yeah.
all these places, and if any given enterprise has, multiple places where they're storing data. I'm sure, like, you might have experienced this. So, I guess in terms of strategy of building products, how much of it are you thinking as, okay, we are going to extend the Box ecosystem into all these surface areas versus like we're going to build some tools or products within the Box ecosystem? Like, talk to me a little bit about like what's your strategic approach on building these new tools or features for Box customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like if you go back to the analogy of like where do people store their structured data? It's in many places for many different reasons. And similarly, there's the very generically large term of unstructured data, like you would store it in many, you use it in many different ways. But for Box, one of our sort of things we're typically known for is to make it very easy to use, make it very easy to extend, make it very easy to secure and to be compliant for all of your data. So for that, we typically would need to sort of manage it. And so we have a million ways to, like in our world, like when you're thinking about, oh, I have data in this repository and data in this repository, we can sync them, you can sync them to local computers, you can sync them across systems. We recently just announced a big partnership with Snowflake where the structured data, the metadata about a file goes into Box, and then it automatically syncs into Snowflake tables. And so that kind of thing is definitely part of what we think about. But in general, for Box, it's key that one of the reasons we offer so much AI, and in many cases we offer the AI just for free on top of the data that you have, even though it's quite expensive, and it is because we want people to be able to bring their data and get all of the benefits of security, of collaboration, of AI on their data. But then we don't at all believe that like we're going to be the only people who are as part of this AI and agentic ecosystem, which is why we partner with basically everyone. We believe that there's going to be these major enterprise platforms that every company will be looking at, and there's different options available to them, whether it's their CRM system and whether it's their ERP system, whether it's their enterprise unstructured data system or their enterprise data system. And our job is to give the best option for them for unstructured data, and then integrate with everybody else along this way, so that you can have our AI agents and the things that we're building working with other companies, in addition to custom AI agents that you build yourself. Because we're unstructured data and a lot of people need to use it, we integrate with other platforms, just non-AI, in addition to AI integrations that let other companies call into our AI capabilities to ask about data, to search, to do deep research, to do data extraction, and so on.
I think Aaron has been pretty vocal about Box, different ways you're thinking about internally at Box in adopting be it drag or agents or copilots or how it's impacting the broader AI ecosystem or enterprise ecosystem. Was there a moment within inside the company where you guys realized that this is a big shift? I mean, Box has been around for what, 20 years now, started in 2005. You've stayed through the route. And was there an internal moment where you said, okay, this is really big for us? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So if you look back, like search like 5 or 6 years ago for like the term, like we would use the term ML at the time, like ML and unstructured data, you find we had big announcements around how Box uses ML for your data, to structure your data. So take unstructured data, structure it, is a big thing that we've done for many years. And so we've always had this kind of trying to be on the bleeding edge of what's available in the world for structured data. But there was this kind of challenge, is that like if you had something like imagine a company, they have like these forms that people are filling out, or they have these documents, or these contracts, or these leases, or these research proposals, or these images, like anything that like a company does day to day. Like, what are people right now in the world when they're working? What are they working on? And a lot of it is unstructured data. But if you're going to have like AI help, or old ML help you, it would be like you train a model, you get data science team together, or you go buy a company. We would see like originally when we started got into this world, we were like, okay, we're going to get an ML model that would be able to handle contracts, to be able to like kind of structure it. Turned out that like that's too complicated. What you need is an ML model to not just contracts, were not just like leases, but like at some point you got one commercial leases in the UK in the last 3 years, and you'd have a model for that, and it kind of didn't really work that well. Like you'd have to train and customize it a lot. So that was just the nature of how it used to be, like a long time ago, being like 4 years ago. And so when generative AI came out, we were watching the early days of like some of the GPT-2 style of, and we were like, it's okay, But then somewhere around the time that ChatGPT came out, GPT 3.5 style of models, suddenly you started to see this amazing moment where a general purpose model could actually start to outperform the specialized models, and it could do things that you never even have bothered to ever try to get. Like, what is the risk assessment of this contract, or like what things like, can you describe whether you think this image is production ready for a catalog? Like those used to not really be things that anybody would bother to ask an ML model. You couldn't even imagine the feature set that you would give into the traditional ML model. But generative AI could kind of do it. It's kind of one of the emergent properties of this. And as it got better, GPT-4 was like sort of this like big like kind of like, oh wow, it's like some of the challenges of the older systems the older models are being fixed. And so GPT 3.5 is I think the moment where we said, let's just go back and retrofit everything about Box to be able to apply AI models on top of it, so that you could do things like chatting through documents and extracting data. And then it was amazing how fast you could actually get things working, and get them working better than you ever had before, even though you had spent like a ton of engineering and development resources on trying to get something working, and that like an hour and a half of using one of the new models actually gave you better performance. So that was a big aha moment. And then of course you realize that like you got 90% of the problem, and the last 10% of the problem is going to take all your time going forward. But really, since then, all of our efforts have been around preparing Box to be an AI first platform, where AI would be a big part of everything that people would do. We often talk internally like, what if we were building Box tomorrow? Remember, Aaron's our founder, and he still thinks in that way, like even after a long time. And this just comes up all the time. Like, if we were building Box today, clearly it would be an AI first experience. So why don't we do that? Like, and then that's just part of our mentality.
So, talk to me a little bit, and I completely relate with the whole, machine learning era of things where, one of the problems when I first started like doing deep learning courses was, Netflix trying to pay $1 million for the competition where, you improve the recommendation system's accuracy for like 2%,
Yeah.
right? That was the era of like
Yeah.
solving very specific problems
Yeah.
of recommendation systems and machine learning systems. But what are some of the earliest use cases that you launched at Box, and how has the enterprise customer adoption been like? Because in enterprise, we often see the cycle of adoption is a little bit slower, a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
But what has your perception been in terms of like what are those features, and then how's the adoption been, and what is the pace of the adoption?
Yeah. So so some of the first features that we launched around AI were this idea of, let's say you're looking at a document. Like, from our view, we're like, obviously going forward forever and from now on, you need to have like an AI next to you to help you chat. Like, I've got a long document, I got a long contract, I've got this proposal, I've got this like help me understand it. Like, it's almost like an advanced find, if you will. And so for us, it was like a simple feature, but it was like it was this sort of new paradigm of how people would do it. So chat with your document, right? And then the most common, some people call it summarization, although most it's actually way more. It's just like anything you want to know about it, almost like you had an AI reading the document and then there for you. And so that was almost like, that was very simple from the sort of conceptually about the kind of feature. And then we added the concept of RAG, so not just a single document, but across documents, where you can go through and then implement the chunking, the vector databases, the ability to go through and be able to find not just a document like a search, but actually finding the answer to your question. So I've got 100,000 documents here in this, like, let's say, the portal of all my product documentation that I'm a salesperson. I need to find the answer to this question. Ask it, and the AI will, quote unquote, read through all of it using RAG, and then go through and provide you the answer. And then a key to all this, to your question, is for enterprises, they were scared. I mean, and some of them still are, about AI because it's so different. It's such a big change, and data security is critical to every single thing that they do. Like, nobody will, even no matter what benefit of AI, if you're going to leak data, if it's going to be a source of data security challenges, remember, this is some of their most critical data they have, no one's going to use it. And so in many cases, like even still today, like a lot of bigger organizations, like the first AI that they're actually using on their production data is Box, partially because it's very hard for them to trust AI companies, because not only need to trust a model, you need to trust the person calling the model, you need to trust the person who has your data. And since Box is sort of that whole stack for them, they were able to say, well, I trust that your AI principles and the AI approach that you have will be secure. And then they're able to then start with some of the simple capabilities. Now, one of the more exciting ones I think many are looking at are in the world of data extraction, where again, you have these not just any document you have on your desktop or whatever, but like, these are my contracts, these are my project proposals, these are my press releases, like just this whole list of like named like content, that have this like special purpose. And there's like this implicit structure to them. So you not only want to see your unstructured data, like the contract, but you want to see the fields, like who signed it, like what time, what are the clauses, and so on. And so then you can then basically search and filter and do things on that data. So these are kind of things that people or enterprises look at that and they say, these are very practical benefits, either from a productivity perspective or from they help them sort of upgrade their internal applications that they have like on some critical data. And they start to go to adopt that. And then they have that internal assessment of, can we get through their AI governance committees? Can you get through the AI security screenings? Can you get through making sure that people, no enterprise will accept you training on their data. It's the scariest thing to them in the world. So you have to so we have to go in and meet with the teams and explain to them every step, go to them the architecture diagrams, show them the audit reviews and so on, so that they know that their data is safe when they're doing AI on it. That's typically their number one concern.
I want to talk a little bit about the cost of leveraging AI, and I think it has dramatically gone down in the past 3 years. In storage, we know that cost per gigabits has gone down probably 90-100% over the last 20 years. It used to cost like some $600 per GB to now it costs like $1 or 1 cent per GB depending on the provision. We are sort of in the similar trajectory. In terms of like for you as a business, you seeing improvement in your margins by creating AI products, like, because you've launched RAGs, you've launched copilots, and you can also talk a little bit about how you're pricing these things, but is it directly impacting your profitability as a company, or is it still like it's breaking even, but over time we see that changing?
Yeah, this is a particularly hard problem for me and for our company, because like depending on, like, we're a public company, right? And like, we publish our here's our gross margin, here's our expenses, here's what it's going to be going forward. And so, it's just not practical for us to do something that would like double our expenses, and so like, like nobody has $100 million laying around to just apply to whatever cool ideas. At the same time, it's very clear that if you're too, worried or stingy about your AI bills, then you will lose to somebody who is just like trying harder to find the new future. And so there's been a really nice sort of byproduct of all the innovation going into the chips and to the models and to the efficiency, is that they're much cheaper than they used to be. Although I'll quote Sam Altman from a long time ago. He had come by and he'd done some conferences with us, and he made and somebody asked him, this is like 3 or 4 years ago, like, do you think models are going to get cheaper, right? Because they were so expensive at the time. And his answer that he told us is, which I think is still true, is, yeah, absolutely, it's going to get way, way, way cheaper, dramatically cheaper, or dramatically cheaper. And you're also going to find that you're going to use it more and more and more and more, and it's going to slightly offset that. So, and that's exactly what we found, is that we are doing way more tokens than we did previously, orders of magnitude. However, we're now utilizing the cheaper models, and they're just offsetting. Like, so something, especially when you get to agentic capabilities, like where you take, like, let's say that you want to do deep research on your data, right? So that's way different than RAG. If you do RAG, take hundreds of gigabytes, go through, find the appropriate level of, 10,000 tokens, 20,000 tokens, go through, pick out the thing, give the answer. Great. You did, and your AI bill is your infra and database capabilities plus 20,000 tokens. But if you want to do deep research on that, then you're going to be like, okay, well, why don't you go through, look a lot of different documents for 10,000 tokens at a time, 50,000, 100,000, then go through and reprocess that. You might spend hundreds of thousands of tokens or more. And then that is just a massive exponential growth on the concept of your AI spend. And so you typically get a great result. Like, doing deep research on your own data is this like kind of revolutionary new thing. Nobody would even consider that a couple of years ago, but it's very expensive. So the way we approach it is to say, we're going to try as much as possible to give AI for free, because that's what an AI first platform would do. Now, sometimes if there's like a very high scale, because we offer the Box as a platform you build on, we then say that like you can pay. Like you can like if you wanted to do 100 million different like data extraction jobs, or some people do on those kind of documents, then there's a platform fee to it. But whenever possible, we're going to eat the cost ourselves and handle that kind of risk, because that's what you want out of your best like products and platforms. Nobody wants to sit there and worry when they're clicking on things that's going to cost them. And so that's just, I think, what many companies are doing is they're trying to protect themselves with some sort of resource-based pricing, but then also try to just say AI is part of the product, and that's our philosophy.
That's very interesting because I was looking at your net income, and it sort of doubled in the last 2 years. And then I thought it's because of AI, but you're giving me information as we are not really incrementally adding costs because you're using AI, which is pretty interesting to me. And that brings up the next question, right? Like, what do you think about pricing based on usage? And there's also this theory of pricing based on outcomes once we are getting into the agent. And you're just, I'm assuming, following the regular per seat, per subscription model.
Yeah. We've been through every single possible flavor of this ourselves, in addition to with our customers. And so I hope that right now, if you're a business school at Harvard or somewhere else, that they're doing like these case studies on how everybody had to rethink all technology pricing and how it's continuing to still happen now. At the end of the day, you for something like pricing a product, it's not just about the supply side of like how much does it cost and so on. It's about like what people are willing to pay and how they're willing to pay for it. Interestingly, so when we originally launched our AI, we had seen that like some people who launched AI, they were charging too much, and people were like, "Hey, it's still early. I'm not ready for that." And then there was this like massive, like you may have seen some of the early companies that were like, "This $20 a month for this thing," like enterprise companies kind of style. And then the adoption was terrible because nobody quite knew what to do with it, and they wouldn't pay that amount across their company. And then so we were like, okay, well, we're going to offer it as free as part of our product, but we put a limit on it. We said, if you do too much, and it'll stop. And then this was like a big decision internally, because it was like, well, if we're not careful and everybody uses death, we're going to have a giant bill. But then people would actually not turn it on because they were enterprises, because they were worried they would hit those limits, and then everybody would be mad at them. So it was funny that the concept of the limit became an adoption barrier. And so then we had said, okay, we got a lot of feedback from our customers, and again, big enterprise customers, and we were like, okay, we turned that off. So there was no limit. Now there was this idea of abuse that we could say, like, if somebody was clearly, like you can't just like buy a seat of Box and use 100, use API to power another system. But through normal usage, that for people, we just said we're going to handle that risk. And we do stuff like this today. Like, it's incredibly expensive if you just like look on the online rates from any public cloud about like transferring data, storing data. Like, this is like, we're used to infrastructure expenses. So we were then saying we're going to eat the cost of it as a way to just deliver better services to our customers. And that continues to be our philosophy.
In the cloud world, this is a pretty common scenario when you're selling storage services or compute services where your transactions are going beyond the limits. And sometimes some products implement some kind of throttling, and some products don't. And they just make sure to adjust provisioning over time and distribute across customers. And so different products have different strategies in terms of how to control that throttling. But the interesting thing was, like, I think Code or someone from cloud was tweeting like some of the developers are running it 24/7, multiple terminals.
Yeah.
Right. So have you got any such scenarios within Box?
Yeah, so people are clever, and so if you have a pricing scheme that is can be abused, you'll almost certainly hit the abuse of somebody's going to figure it out, right? Like, so Box, you get unlimited storage. Now, if you read the fine print, you have unlimited storage as a user, and if you're a person, and that doesn't mean you can power a 100 petabyte system by buying one user of Box. That's the platform use case. That's different. But people, especially developers, are quite clever, and they will find a way to do it. So we don't. I think if you're overly worried about that, if as a startup, then you're going to miss out on the people who just want to use it and get more value out of it. So for us, we typically do have abuse prevention. That's important to everything we do. Some people will try to completely abuse the bandwidth in the storage of Box. But if it's a real customer who just wants to use it, we don't stop them. Like, people can actually overwhelm our they buy this amount and then they use this amount. And it's the same with our users. We don't stop you if you want to use more users. We don't stop you if you want to use more API calls. We don't stop you if you want to use more AI, because that's great. That's what we want. That's our job, is to let you use valuable things. And to the extent that it becomes a problem from a contractual or commercial point of view, we'll contact the customer, we'll talk to them. And that's the benefit we have as an enterprise company, to be able to have like salespeople and account teams that talk to them. But I would we typically don't try to stop real usage. That's great for us.
So one of the interesting thing is, storage is such a horizontal sort of use case, and maintaining content on Box is also the horizontal way of thinking it. But then initially, all AI use cases were horizontal. Like we created a Copilot, Microsoft has a Copilot, and lots of Copilot sort of form factors came in, which makes sense. But then you also, I mean, any company is selling solutions for different industries, and Box also sells solutions for different industries, and you prioritize those kind of features. Did it come to you like just purely in terms of product strategy? We started the split in terms of new products coming in AI, which are specifically targeted for a particular knowledge worker persona. Like Cursor is targeted for a developer, or
Yeah.
RV is targeted towards legal assistants, or senior counsels or junior counsels in a law firm. And most of the data is in Box. Like is this something you evaluated in terms of like, hey, we have an opportunity here where you can create specific products on top of Box, which you can sell to customers in this particular vertical? Is that something that you guys have thought, and what is your opportunity evaluation in that case?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very fundamental question for any company. Is like, especially a company that delivers a SaaS product that's useful for IT people, right? Like, because you have this question of like, am I going to focus on a specific vertical and a problem, or am I going to focus on generically, like across the board? And at Box, one of our product principles is to focus on the horizontal IT use cases. Many of our customers use Box in their whole environment. Much of our value proposition is across the whole environment. Like in everybody in a company wants the security features, they want the compliance features, they want the sharing features. So like, and this is why we talk about it as content or files. Like, and who, everybody needs files. Like now, and if you notice, some companies that are specialized in one area, they'll talk about not files, they'll talk about contracts and clauses. Or they'll talk about digital assets and marketing material, catalog items, and so on. And this is, I think, a big question for any startup, which is, do you try to build a platform that is horizontally useful, or do you try to specialize in one area? And there's a very critical trade-off. Just sort of like when we were a startup, several times I had to deal with this. Is go deep or go broad. I mean, if you go deep, you typically can make much more targeted. You talk to customers, you know exactly what you want. They tell you, I want this clause, and I want to turn this risk, and there's 17 types of clauses, like that kind of feedback. And there's great companies that do that kind of thing. But then the value of like across the board, like your total market size is way diminished. Like for us at Box, no one industry makes up more than like 10% of our overall like everything we sell to. They're depending on how you slice and dice it, like across regions, across different markets, across different like size companies, and so you end up like, we have a giant market, but then the specialization. The more you specialize, the more you're probably not going to solve a problem for somebody else. So this is a generic problem across the board. So for the interesting part about AI is that it pulls you in two different directions at once. And I think you'll see almost like a reshuffling from some companies, because some people will start to use AI to very specifically solve some problems. I've seen some really cool companies come out that are solving like life sciences challenges, or maybe some like FinServ challenges. But at the same time, in some cases, some of the historical companies that had focused so much, like a generic AI can actually solve that now. In which case now people would be like, I wonder if I can go back to a generic solution I don't have to have a million point solutions to solve problems. I can have one more generic solution to solve it. So this, for startups and in general for everybody, including Box, we always have to analyze how deep to go in an industry versus horizontally how much to give. And AI reshuffles it.
Talk to me a little bit about, I think you guys are one of the first companies who sort of adopted being an AI first company, right? What does that mean, and how does it change how you operate as a company and or as a team?
Yeah, I mean, so it's always fun to talk to different people about what they mean by AI first. So some people say AI native, some people say AI first, and they all have slightly different tweaks. When I use the word AI first, or when we talk about a Box, we typically think of the definition being that you will think about the way that you would build the feature, knowing the full abilities of AI. So search is interesting as an example. because the historic way that you would build search is completely different from how you would build search in a world where you had like an AI experience or an agentic experience. Not only from the technology perspective with the like new things like better vector embeddings and so on, but like also from the technique of people act differently when they go to a search box than when they do talking to an agent. So like many people these days will utilize something like ChatGPT or Gemini or others to do internet search. And it's funny because if you look at what you typed into Google versus what you typed into your chat experiences is kind of different. And that's an interesting moment for for Box to think about, like, if you're thinking AI first, that you don't think I just need to put an AI thing inside of that search box. You think, how can I rethink the search experience from the beginning so that people who are getting comfortable with talking AI can use it? So so we have announced the concept of our agentic search, or our some people call it deep search, where you ask an AI and it will not just go through and search with a complicated search system, but it will actually then look at the results and then figure out whether or not those results match what you're looking for. So it goes well beyond RAG and into the concept of using intelligent agents to then loop and to figure out if they have the best answer or if they need to try again. And that concept of thinking about it that way, not just I have a model, I want to use it, or yeah, I added an assistant, but like, what can AI do for you? And especially if you think agentically, like that becomes a different product process, a different engineering process, a different strategy process, where you start to invest heavily in your AI platform layers and in the way that you have common AI interactions in your products, so that, like an agentic experience or an AX is I think a new term that didn't really exist that long ago. And if you're going to be an AI first company, even if you don't do something AI related, you need to examine the fact that maybe the AI will change the way that you done something traditional.
I think we went through RAGs, we went through copilots, and then I think the next thing that we are seeing is, agents. How are you thinking about agents within Box, and like, have you implemented any sort of agents? Like, what is your definition of agents? Because I think there's a lot of confusion between like automation, something like, you automate with Zapier or N18 or some of these tools that look like an agent in some form, and you can fairly say that agent when you add AI on top of that workflow. But
Yeah.
how do you define AI as sort of an AI agent?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a great question. It's like a fun debate all the time. And so my definition of an AI agent, sort of technically speaking, and I actually Harrison from LangChain, his CEO there, he has a fun definition. If you kind of hear him talk about this, an agent is something that decides when it's done. And so like that's kind of an interesting concept. Normally you run like, I'm going to build something and then you have code and it completes and it's done. But if you have an AI agent, it needs to figure out when it's done. And that is one of the definitions, technically speaking, which I think is a good one, of what is an agent. I personally that's kind of a esoteric sort of engineering kind of answer. A slightly more detailed engineering answer, which is the one I normally give, is an agent has an objective, it has instructions, it has an AI model, a brain, and then it has tools that it can then decide to utilize with context to be able to operate. I'm a fan of agents that have the ability to then call in other agents, like a multi-agent system. And so typically when I'm thinking about agents, or if I say the word agentic, I'm thinking about multiple agents cooperating together. Now, I have no problem at all with the idea that there's a very simple agent that just has like a one kind of thing it does, and I think that's an agent. Some people would argue and be like, no, like, is a GPT, like the old style OpenAI like customization, is that an agent? I kind of think it's the beginning of agent. I call those like V0 agents, but those are fun to debate. But to me, the power of agents going forward is this idea that they can, you can think about them as little state diagrams of intelligent steps that can loop and then do more sophisticated things. And so, and if you're thinking agentically, this is a really interesting organizational and sort of engineering approach, which is that you start to think about, I wonder if I can get a group of agents to solve this, as opposed to me coding up something specific. And this is a very different thought process for most engineers who have been working for 10 years or longer, because you never think that way. Instead, I'm going to program. You give me the requirements and I make these things happen, instead of saying, I wonder if I can present the data to a series of agents that I can instruct to do something. And you asked for an example. So one of the examples is deep research. And so if you think about what it takes to do something like deep research, like in Box, you have to first go through, you have to search, you have to go through and you have to be able to like look at the results. You have to get them. You have to look at the files. You have to make an outline based on what you found. Then you have to go through and you have to create the pros and then go through and figure out whether that's a good and critique it. And that's like 15 steps for these agents. Like, and then so we would call that a deep research agent, but then it has a multi-agent workflow to be able to sort of process that. And so these and really, I don't know if you could actually have it done deep research very well, even if you spent a ton of time previously, because there's too many paths that you have to like handle along the way. So it's like the kind of thing that works really well for an intelligent system, like an agent, to think through how to orchestrate all that.
Yeah, they're almost like V1 of agents, and we are seeing new versions. And somewhere between that V0 and V1, we have these automation tools, which are now so powerful just because you have added a step where AI is a step, but then that whole workflow becomes so powerful because you have that AI step in between, which took me as a human to interfere and make a decision. And now that's solved. So many of those decisions that would otherwise require a stop would now are smoothened out because this AI taking those decisions. And most of for 95% of those use cases, within a little bit of error rate, you can get a great workflow going. At some, if it was 80% before, it is now 95% after.
Totally agree. And then the really interesting thing is when you take like these really complicated agents that do so much, and you look at their state diagram and their little mermaid graph style of it, and then you're like, wow, like it did a lot. And then, but it produces one piece of output, and then you then call that as a tool in another agent at a higher level, and you start to see that like you can there's these like layers of abstraction you can stack, and then to me it starts to resemble organizations of people, like the way that we organize ourselves into companies or into processes or into teams. And you start to realize that the output of whole teams turns into an input for one thing going forward. And then that concept, I think, is part of why people are so excited about agents, especially in the enterprise, where they're excited about the idea of these benefits, excited about doing things that they never could do before, service their customers better, process that loan faster, be able to like handle that customer support quicker, because you can actually kick off these very complex processes. And to me, that's the key of agents: is the more complex it is, the more that like complex in like the way a human would describe it, like, wow, that requires a lot of intelligence to fix. And then those kind of things are where agents start to shine, and where you start to see these like, wow, I never could do that before, which is, I think, part of why people are like, some people, interesting debate on how much AI hype we have at the moment, but this would justify the hype if you were able to do more and more of these things inside of an enterprise.
Do you see any like form factor for agents? One I've seen is, developers are more commonly known, like you open a terminal, you set do a job there, like, and you let that terminal do its job, and you go on to your next job in your terminal. In another instance of your terminal, that's one way of thinking of how agents work. Now, deep research is another example. You give a prompt about deep research, but in a context of like enterprise product sense, like, are you seeing like how does that form factor play out? Like, do you see any form factor that's more concrete?
Yeah, I would. Form factor is an interesting term, but I think that there's like the AI models concept, which is kind of a more of a developer concept, right? Like you just think of almost like the chat completion or the completion AI, like that would be the old school way to do it. And then there's this idea of AI assistant, right, where you have like something there to help you in context, but it's typically like one shot, right? Like it's like, here AI model, here's a bunch of data, and it's like, you see it like print out. It's a single answer, and you only have so much time, right? Like you don't accept a 5-minute response, like, but then now again, the term agentic experience, I think, is a very interesting in this form factor discussion, AX, which is, and you just see that like OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, they do a great job of building a ton of valuable capabilities into their agentic experience. You just go to ChatGPT, and or whatever your favorite tool is, I think they're all great. And then you ask whatever question, and then it just figures out, I'm going to search the internet, I'm going to do deep research for you, give it hints, you click and you tell it what you want. And like, so that experience, I think, is, it was very debatable, and I suppose it still is, whether that's going to be a persistent experience, whether people will want to continue to chat with agents. But I would say it has stood the test of time and has gone through a bunch of key sort of challenges. And so this idea that you go in and you sort of ask any system, I want to do something, and then you have something that can recognize your context. I think context engineering is a really critical aspect of agentic stuff going forward. And maybe this is the new form factor that you deal with. But you need to recognize what people might want to do in that experience. And so even at Box, like if I kind of dive into this context engineering a little bit, when you're in our main screen, which is like, you just log in and there's a bunch of files, what you want to do when you're typing into like a global experience across our product is very different than if you have a file there, or if you have a set of folders, or if you are logging into our what we call our Box apps, and you see like all of your contracts or invoices or all the different kind of structured data, and then you type something there. So you have to actually, the hard engineering problem and the hard application and product problem is to make agents that figure out what you might want at that point. And then you have to, and so we think about like, let's build an agentic, an agent that handles this kind of thing with a flow, and say, but maybe they want this, this, or this, so figure that out first, and then do a search, or go in and query the system, or go in and bring data together. And that context engineering is critical. I believe that context engineering is probably one of the more interesting areas that are developing, and if people want to be sort of like, have a lot of job opportunities in the future, I think context engineering will be something that everybody will want to start to hire sometime soon.
I think the next topic I want to touch upon is the whole productivity aspect of things, and did it affect, like, firstly, how much of your productivity improvement are you seeing within your company, and the second one is how much. I mean, obviously there's a group of people who are panicked about, like, okay, this is going to destroy jobs and this is going to take away knowledge workers' job, and
Yeah.
probably the first one to go is the developer's job. So can you talk a little bit of both of those aspects?
Yeah, a couple questions there. I'll cycle through them. So first, for productivity for our customers, what we see typically is that people start to use AI and they're a little bit skittish, and then they use it more and more and more over time. And so you start out, especially in enterprises, not a lot of adoption because they're scared. But then they take they take these big chunks and they start to add it, and then in the sort of, you think of it as like a funnel, and then people start to use it, and then you see acceleration over time of usage. And that I think it will be common in the enterprise. I mean, if you go back and read things like Crossing the Chasm and others, like we definitely have a chasm that you have to cross for many of these kind of features. So for different styles and companies and so on. So I believe that like getting people started with the basics and letting them learn how to use it, how an individual person can use it to be productive, that's sort of the key. And in addition, it's like a pipeline. You just keep adding more and more features so they can get more and more interested in it. For us, we have seen benefits, serious benefits, as most companies have, about using things like for our developers, like assisted tools. Like we started with GitHub Copilot. Cursor has been great. There's a lot of excitement these days around cloud code. So as the models have gotten better, as the integrations with your development environments have gotten better, all of these are just helping us overall. Now, for us, we don't at all think of it like, oh, we can save money, therefore have fewer developers. Instead, we're like, let's just say if 25% of our code is written by AI, that's 25% more that we can do to deliver value to customers. We're not constrained by like, there's not a fixed amount that we want of output from our developers. We want more. So if tools help people become more productive, then that's wonderful. We'll take that. And most of the companies I talk to think that way, by the way, which is that they're thinking about how to do everything and do it better, as opposed to thinking, I have a fixed need for something, therefore I need to try. So I'm sort of economically speaking, I'm not a believer in the lump of labor fallacy. I believe it's a fallacy, which is to say that like there's only a fixed amount of things people want to do, and if something is doing them, or if it gets then there's fewer jobs. I think it's actually the opposite, which is that if things get better, cheaper, if they get more streamlined, then you want more of it. And I'll say even something like video and content creation from the perspective of having people, there's this big push of whether or not people we're gonna have fewer people making videos and content and marketing, but for developers, for internal content, for marketing, for all these things, we want more of them because there's so many great new avenues to do, and it's now things are possible that used to be there. Now there's a very important aspect of it, which is if change happens too quickly, sometimes that's very disruptive. And there are people who will sort of and I'm very sensitive to the plight of people who are need to be who are in the middle of a disruption that then changes the organizational and in some cases get rid of jobs. But I also want to sort of highlight that the way many people, including myself, see it as a tool to help companies do more. And remember, most companies are thinking about this. It's not a secret that a few people are looking at. So you need to just kind of constantly be competing with other people who are doing the same thing. And oftentimes that means you need good people to do work using AI to help them, as opposed to cutting whole areas. And so I do believe that there is, we'll see it evolve and things change all the time. But I see this as a benefit right now.
Is there in terms of like, yeah, I could see a junior developer, and I've been talking to different CTOs and CPOs around this, and some CTOs have the opinion that they no longer need a lot of junior developers, and they no longer see a need for junior developers. But I always thought that uh, this is actually much better for junior developers to, because if it was taking them 3 or 4 years to become senior level skill, it will now take them 1 year, because in every team there's always a junior developer tagging a senior developer and asking a bunch of questions on how to do things, and now you have the cursor or GitHub Copilot acting as a senior developer upskilling the junior developer. So that has been my perspective, and I'd love your take on how you're seeing, like how much progression you're seeing in the junior
Yeah.
employees.
I think there's a couple flavors that I think what you said is true, is that you kind of when you add a junior developer in any company, like oftentimes you expect like a certain relatively small level of output compared to maybe some more senior people. But now like a person who's really good at using the latest tools is actually quite productive, and that is a big value. And so you expect to get more out of it. So like a Box, like we are approaching, like I think we are right now the most developers we've ever had, and I think that's projecting to continue. And we're not only hiring like senior people, we're hiring like people who across the whole spectrum, and we just would expect people to be able to use tools. In fact, I do believe that I anecdotally see that people who are coming out of school now, they've kind of lived through they've always known like AI assisted coding, and they're good at it, like compared to somebody who's been around for a long time, who basically is still learning, not maybe, or like maybe some people resisted the using it. And so there's like a benefit to having new people who are really good at it. And also there's like a philosophy that like context engineering, like I mentioned, where it's like a slightly different form of the way that you do coding, where instead of traditional systems programming, like you are helping to bring context to an agent that will then be part of your application. And I think that's really critical. And a lot of times we some of our most successful context engineers are relatively junior in terms of how long they've been out of school, but really excel at that kind of thing.
I think we have an audience question, which is an interesting question. Sarah asks, "How do you? Can you share a little bit about like document parsing and how you're extracting those documents, and what are the models you're using, or what are the technologies that you're using behind the scenes?"
Yeah. So in this world of handling unstructured data, like there's this sort of set of things that you always need to do, right? So that you have all these different file types. So the first thing you need to do is like get it to a usable format. Like Markdown is a great format, and sometimes they're scan documents, sometimes they're different formats. So there's this big conversion as a first step, and it's funny how many people these days talk about like PDF because of all of the weird things that go into PDF. So at some point, PDF is not a good format for something like AI to figure out. It needs to be converted to something else. So step one would be to convert it to like this text, or it's sort of text with some limited style support, like Markdown. And then you typically go through, and with that structure in mind, with the tables in mind, with all the different pieces, you go through and you chunk it, right? So, and then the chunking algorithms, because you typically want to make a vector out of the different data, the most important sort of section of data. And it's kind of interesting because you don't want you want it to kind of contain a whole thought. You wouldn't do it per sentence, because whenever thoughts are over sentences. But if you did it for giant pages or whole documents, you end up with like too many confused topics. So you want a vector to sort of indicate what that area thing is about. Graphs at a high level work well, but then you need kind of more advanced chunking strategies. And then you stick that into a vector database, and then or you take the text and you put it into your traditional search database. And then when you go to
Are you building your own proprietary tools for this, or are you using like LangChain with or Pinecone or other VectorDB, or
yeah,
which other tools?
my philosophy and the philosophy of Box is that we love all the tools that everybody makes. Like if some people are building the best tool out there, the best vector database, the best document chunker, the best agentic framework, we want to use it. I gave a speech recently at the LangChain conference about all the benefits of something like LangGraph, and why when we started, we had built our own, right? Because there wasn't all this stuff available at the time. But then we are more than happy to go back and retrofit to some of the other systems. Like I am very impressed at the last few years of vector databases and how they've gotten so good in so many different ways, different embeddings from different people. So why would we bother to rebuild the things that people are doing such a great job building, especially in the open source community, and especially or tools that we can buy. Like so, we're big fans. Like we will replace stuff that we just built because it's better, and that's part of our philosophy. And actually with AI, you kind of have to reevaluate Like it used to be like, oh yeah, we'll double check our databases every few years, and then now it's like every 6 months we have to reassess like whether or not our current tool set is available for, or even our infrastructure tools are interesting. But so we do use many of these different tools, and we're always like kind of like experimenting on whether or not we can replace something that we built internally.
So one final topic I want to touch is about the models and different types of models. In an enterprise, there's almost, there's always a little bit, we are less risky in terms of, what are the things that we adopt. We want to adopt the latest and greatest, but we're also less risky. We also want to make sure that it's secure. So which models are you working with primarily to offer your products? On top of which models are you building?
Yeah, we made a decision a long time ago. One is we weren't going to try to build models. I'm super happy. At the time, it wasn't obvious, but super happy we did that. And then also we are going to support all of the best models from that are trustworthy. So for us, that there's a lot of good models, and we're constantly reassessing. But for us right now, we support the OpenAI based models, we support the Anthropic models, the cloud models, we support Llama based models, and we support Gemini models. And then so we consider those to be some of the best models out there. And they're safe and they're secure. And not only do we support them, but we support them on a trusted environment. And this is critical for many enterprises. It's like some models are like Llama. You can. There's many places that run them, but some of them people really trust. Like we have a partner AWS, right? So in AWS Bedrock is a very trustworthy set environment to then run something like the cloud models or the Llama models. IBM will support for you Llama models, and these are like trustworthy names from enterprise perspective. So we utilize these, so trusted provider and a trusted model, and then we pick ourselves which model works best. So I think that Gemini is great for something like data extraction. The GPT style models like GPT-4.1 or it is great at the idea of like kind of chatting with people, and they're all pretty close, I'd say, these days. The leading models, but like you kind of pick the best one for different experiences. But then we let our customers switch as they want. And so if somebody says, I really think that this data extraction is best for Claude 4, we let people do it. So we support sort of all of the models, and one of our goals is to support them as they come out. This is very expensive and painful, but it is like for us internally to be able to support all of them. When you deal with it, you realize that like how you properly prompt and context engineer cloud models is different from Gemini models, is different from OpenAI models, and so you end up like repeating some of your efforts. But for enterprises, they often have preferences, and one of our jobs as an open platform is to be able to handle those. So we sort of become experts in supporting multiple models. For a traditional startup, I don't know if this is worthwhile to them because it's like you only have so many resources. But I do believe that you will run into enterprises who will say, I realize that Claude is the best for this, or I, for some reason, really want Gemini or AWS or whatever. Like, and so like those choices are important for enterprise usage.
And one final question before we close the conversation. I mean, you've done a startup. I think AI opened up sort of a wave of new ideas that were not possible before. If you were building now something, are there any ideas that you or if I was not at Box, go and attack, or even that could be focused on unstructured data or something else in the enterprise ecosystem, or completely tangential as well?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I do believe there's an awful lot of startups out there who are doing really interesting things. One interesting idea is to look at areas that maybe like their old school traditional software approach could be disruptive, but maybe it is so like old that people don't really think is cool or interesting anymore. I think that's maybe some of the anything that's like big and like it's like this giant market. Like there's an awful lot of competition for those things. So I think that finding something that is very valuable, but like not as sort of like in the news, like anything that's like we're talking about like all the time will probably have so much competition might be behind. But I will highlight one thing though, which I think is really interesting. Like if you see something like Cursor, like nobody talked about Cursor a couple years ago. Like and it was and it's a relatively small like lab at the time. Like and then they had like Microsoft GitHub Copilot, right? It was just like one of the biggest companies in the world, and they provided a pretty good solution. And so an interesting thing is that you with Cursor or even some of the other newer things, like you start to realize that even though people are using AI to do something to solve a problem, there might be a better way. And if you can make a really good product, even despite the product, the VC advice and the marketing advice, oh, you'll never make that. Like this is there's a kill zone and all this other stuff. Like often that's very good advice, by the way. But like oftentimes you could be like, if you really believe you can do it better, and like you have a shot. Now it's a dangerous and difficult path, and many companies won't make it. But like I think there are demonstrations of people who did not just have a good idea or a good sort of philosophy, but like a really good product. And I do believe those still have a chance in AI sort of crazy times we live in to become large companies because they're just solved the problem really well. And so you should always focus on doing that really well.
Yeah, I mean, Cursor literally cloned VS Code.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? If they thought the UI can be better on just that product, and that's the main differentiation there.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised why GitHub Copilot folks are not just copying some of those things.
I mean, there's a lot of dynamics that go into sort of any existing product that like sometimes a fresh look at it, even a problem that seems solved is can be helpful.
And it's also such a large category because writing code is such a big category, and there's been multiple winners. And I still think there are more winners going to come in this coding space because of how huge that category is. And it's also like I just want to pay and use it because as a developer, for me, the ROI is so high that I would rather pay another $20 to another tool and just try it out because it can yield so much productivity for me.
Yeah, I mean,
this was a great conversation, Ben. Thanks for coming on the show and giving your valuable time. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me on, and fun chat.